and welcome to the first tutorial in my series, Chinese Philosophy and Theory. I'm Krystal Couture, and I'm here today to share with you about the principles of Yin and Yang. Before we get started, I just want to read this passage. It's the first passage from the Tao Te Ching. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of the 10,000 things. If we connect in with this passage, I'll read it one more time, but when we connect into this passage, we start to get an understanding of the vagueness and the ambiguity of spirit and how spirit translates into our physical life experience. So once again, the Tao, which is the path or the way, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of the 10,000 things. In Chinese philosophy, there's a concept of which oneness comes into play, this sort of eternal destiny, this aspect of spirit. And if we think of that aspect of spirit, that's really one. And of course, we have a physical manifestation of life. That physical manifestation of oneness, spirit, divine, destiny, that becomes two. Two is going to be yin and yang. From yin and yang, we start to develop the principles of heaven and earth. From there, we gain the concept of humanity. So now one becomes two becomes three. Three becomes the 5 elements in nature: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And from that perspective, we start to build into the 10,000 things. So we have sort of these concepts that are very ethereal. And then the 10,000 things are the things that we know. They're the things that make up our tangible world. But the 10,000 things are actually really just the manifestation of spirit. And I feel like it's really important to understand that concept before we dive deep into what is yin and yang. If you're taking one of my classes, having these foundational tutorials under your belt is going to be an asset in understanding how the medicine works, how the theory works, and how you can connect deeper with your own true nature. So we'll start off with the concept of yin and yang. Basic concepts here. The idea of yin and yang was first documented around the 3rd century BC. Essentially, what it means is that all things exist as an inseparable and contradictory opposite. Okay, so if we look at this concept of the yin and yang, this depiction of it, we see white and we see like a bluish gray color, right? And they're interconnected with each other. We also see a blue dot within the white and a white dot within the blue, which is the idea that one cannot solely exist without components of the other. While yin and yang are going to be opposite polarities, they're going to attract and complement each other. The polarity is going to hold the opposite within it. Therefore, we can never have just yang without any yin. We can't have yin without yang. These concepts must exist together. They create a balance of oneness. Harmony is achieved when both yin and yang exist in equal parts. And that's as depicted in this image, okay? In this image, we're using the concept of the dark side, the blue side, to represent the yin and the white side to represent yang. You'll understand why in just a moment. There's no superiority between yin or yang. They simply just are. They're simply the first duality that comes through from oneness. I want to share with you here the qualities that make up yin and yang. So yang is masculine. It is white, it is light, it has the direction of south. The element most associated with the peak of yang is going to be fire. Yang has warmth. It is active. There's strength, power. There's an outward energy or an extroverted energy. There's a hardness to yang energy. This is like the very peak of the mountain. Yang is also representative of heaven or the Father, and it provides form. So if we break this down and we think about this in a little greater detail than simply what these qualities are, if we bring it back to nature, the peak of summer, everything is blooming as big as it possibly can. The sun is beating down. It's hot, it's warm. There's lots of light and sunshine. You're active, you're outside, you're engaging with others. That's yang energy. It's got this strength, it's got this fortitude. Now, some people feel their very best in the summertime and they want to be most outward, they want to be most active. They find that they've got the most strength. And if we think back to nature, if we think back to days of farming and whatnot, we'll see that this component exists in those spaces. In the middle of summer, we have to work hard on our crops, right? We have to be outside every single day. In the winter, in the middle of winter, we're not going to be outside. We're not going to be as outward, right? Also, this concept of the peak of the mountain. The peak of the mountain is the place where we ascend to that's going to provide light without distraction, warmth without distraction. So when we ascend to that peak of the mountain, it's the closest place to heaven. It's the peak of yang, okay? Yang, again, is going to provide form and structure. Yang is our physical embodiment in a way. There's also a masculine nature to yang versus a feminine nature in yin. And that doesn't necessarily mean male or female. It can, but it's not isolated to such strict guidelines. And also we have to remember that this concept of yin and yang means that both masculine and feminine exist in perfect balance to each other, right? So we could take any of these qualities going down the list. We could say masculine and feminine, and we could put them in that yin and yang model, that imagery, because they must exist in the same ways. So if we think into our body, we have many feminine qualities and we have many masculine qualities. They show up at different times. They serve us in different ways. But the reality is they must exist together in some form of balance, and one cannot exist without the other. Okay, so the concept of yin. Yin is feminine. The color is like black or deep gray or deep blue. It's considered the shadow side. The moon is associated with yin, the north direction, which of course brings us to the water element, the winter season. Cold is associated with yin. There's a passiveness to that yin time. There's reflection. There's an inward or introverted turning. There's a softness associated with yin. It's the deepest depth of the sea. It represents the underworld. And rather than providing form or structure, yin actually provides us with spirit. So you can see these two concepts, like yang providing us with form and yin providing us with spirit. Those are almost like the dots within, right? That form sits right within that deep, dark yin place. The spirit sits within that bright, beautiful yang place. So talking about yin, the deepest depths of the sea, we think about, or the deepest depths of the womb. The womb is another great example. The deepest depths of the sea, when we go down under the ocean, taking a dive, I don't know if you've ever dove before, but if you take a dive, there's this peacefulness. As you dive deeper, it's cooler, it's darker, and yet there's something very settling about it. There's something that provides a solace. And that's really the essence of yin. So yin exists, of course, in the moon cycles rather than the sun cycles. We see yin most active at night, that feminine time. Now, we can also, in traditional texts in Chinese medicine and Taoism, we talk about the sun side of the mountain and the shadow side of the mountain, or light and shadow. And so on that sunny side of the mountain, right, as we talked about, we already have the sun coming in, the light is lighting that space, the rocks are warmed by the sun. And on the shadow side, it's cooler. And we've got moss growing, right? And it's a little bit moister and cooler, and it just kind of brings you in, it sucks you in. That's a yin energy. Yin energy, middle of winter. You want to be more passive. You go inward toward yourself. There's not this exuberance or this brightness, but rather a soothing, sort of calming, reflective time. And nature, of course, is telling us, you know, when we've got a big storm, when it storms like 2 feet of snow on us, which it just did here in the middle of March, 2 feet of snow coming right down, right? It says, don't go outside. It's not safe to go outside. It turns you back toward yin. It turns you back toward that winter, turns you back toward reflection. It's really important to understand these distinctions and, of course, recall that they exist together within each other. Okay, so now what we're going to talk about is the concept of yin and yang in relationship to the elements, okay, or something that I like to refer to as elemental balance. So we've already talked about the peak of yin is going to be the water element, the middle of winter, when it's the coldest, when it's the darkest. The peak of yang, when it's the brightest, is going to be that summer, that fire element, okay? We're gonna go down to the earth element. The earth element is a state of harmony. It's a state of balance. The season associated with it is the late summer. So it's going to have an equal balance of both yin and yang. Now we've got 2 elements left, metal and wood. So we'll think about metal as the autumn and wood as the spring. Metal is sort of the decline and wood is sort of the growth, right? So if you can kind of think about it in your head a little bit, you can see that as we turn from winter to spring, we're going to start to have more light. We're going to have to start to have more warmth, right? All of those things make the wood element or the spring season a little bit more yang. So it's going to be known as lesser yang. Fire, of course, is greater yang. Now the metal element, we come off of the peak of summer, off of the heat of summer, and things start to decline. They start to cool down. We start to turn inward a little bit more, bringing the harvest within. All of those things are the turn toward yin. So we're going to have the metal element as lesser yang. So once again, we've got, I'll start with wood. Wood is going to be our lesser yang. Fire, greater yang. Earth is the balance point. Metal is lesser yin, and water is greater yin. So we have this beautiful cycle of how the elements work together. Now we'll take one quick pause here to talk about earth for just another moment. So earth is not only about a perfect harmony, it's about when things are uncertain. We can't really tell if it's yin or yang. We can't really tell what season it is. So in addition to late summer, which is perhaps the longest sort of season of unknown, late summer is like the days are still really, really warm and the nights start to cool down. The plants are still able to kind of get up to their peak, even though you think they might not be able to. That's a nice long season of earth. But in addition to that, the solstices and the equinoxes are also associated with earth. And their association with earth is basically, again, this time of uncertainty. We don't know, is it winter or is it spring? Last week it was 70 degrees and today there's 2 feet of snow outside. We don't know what season it is. That's the earth element coming in and sharing its gift. We don't know if it's yin or yang, you know? Yesterday was very yang and today is very yin. So that's that earth element coming in. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this tutorial on the concepts of yin and yang, and I hope you have a grander understanding of yin and yang. And what I would like to encourage you to do as you're interacting with the world and as you're interacting with nature, to start to see yin and yang and start to see if they're balanced within your experience. If everything in your life is so outward and there's no time for inward reflection, perhaps there's an imbalance there. Or the opposite, right? If the opposite occurs and everything is really, really inward and you're reflecting and you're isolated all of the time, maybe there is an imbalance. Maybe there's not enough yang in your life. So, how do you get yang if it feels like it's deficient? Or how do you get yin? How do you welcome in those spaces? Thank you so much for being with me, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.